Hello YouTube, hope you're having a great day today. Today I want to talk about one of my personal favorite horror writers of all time. It's Ambrose Bierce. And if you probably know who Ambrose Bierce is if you have read any sort of thing from American history. You might have encountered some of his short stories in your English or literature classes and such. Today we're going to be looking at one of his horror short stories. It's very fast, like 4 pages long. It's basically flash fiction. It's called An Inhabitant of Carcosa. And then after we talk a little bit about it, I'm actually going to read it for you because it's like 3 or 4 pages long. It's probably take me 5 minutes to read through it. And I want to give you a feel for the story itself and where it's going and such as a part of this review. Again, normally during reviews I don't read passages, but this is not the first time I've actually read part of something for you. And I want you to get a feel for Ambrose Bierce. Ambrose Bierce is this great American writer. He wrote a lot of stuff. He was such a prolific writer during his career. He was born in the 1840s, in Ohio, in Meigs County, in this little cave creek, and then he was famous writer. He lived over in San Francisco. He was super famous for being harsh and very harsh of other people's writing when they were just writing annoying stuff just to sell to the masses and such. And so he had these reviews in the San Francisco papers that were just eviscerate these these people that are just trying to sign checks and stuff, rather than really spending time and really kind of developing the story, the concepts, doing something different, you know, building up their grammar and such. But if you were doing that, then you would get, you know, he would definitely be one of your buddies if you put yourself into your work. So, but he also was a publisher, a writer of a lot of things. I think he wrote more than 250 short stories, many of which are in the horror genre, which we'll be looking at here in a little bit. Some of which you may have read in your stories, like you might have read An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge is regularly in a lot of sort of English story collections that you read, you know, in English classes or reading classes growing up. It's really good. It's been turned into Twilight Zone episodes and other things too, and been modernized. It's a great story. I love it to death. He is also famous for writing the Devil's Dictionary. Typically today, when you go and read the Devil's Dictionary, you're going to find it in a collection where he's got all the things in it. It's a satirical sort of view of words and such, and he'll define words in these sort of fun little satirical, whimsical ways that are kind of politically astute and such, and how we've kind of corrupted this language and what they mean in American culture. And it's super popular. It's heavily quoted, but it wasn't actually published in a book form like you're finding it today. It was actually published in multiple columns in papers throughout much of his career. And so the collection of the Devil's Dictionary that you find today are just those columns and those definitions that showed up year in and year out under Ambrose Bierce. So it's kind of a collection of his Devil's Dictionary columns rather than you know, just one book that he wrote. But he was a heavy prolific writer, books, short stories, critical columns, critiques, the Devil's Dictionary columns that he had. So many different things. I mean, this guy loved to write, and you can definitely tell it. I also think he's a good, solid craftsman. He has these, he's a wordsmith. He'll have these lines, these things that are just going to resonate with you when you read them. You're like, wow, he has this ability and this gift to put words together in such a way that really evoke the scene that he's trying to send out to you. And hopefully you'll get a chance to see this. What we're going to be taking a look at now is An Inhabitant in Carcosa. An Inhabitant of Carcosa is actually one of my personal favorite short stories in the horror genre. I love it a lot. It's also very important, and we'll take a look at why afterwards, and what sort of heavily influential on a lot of horror works is going to come later. It's written in the 1880s, which is when he's writing a lot of his sort of a lot of his works have started to become influenced by Guy de Maupassant, the French writer who was famous for a lot of his kind of surprise endings. So he's going to start to incorporate those, and you're going to see that here in this story. So again, here is An Inhabitant of Carcosa. A little paragraph to introduce it. For there be divers sorts of death, some wherein the body remaineth, and some it vanisheth quite away with the spirit. This commonly occurreth only in solitude such as God's will, and none seeing the end we say the man is lost or gone on a long journey, which indeed he hath, but sometimes it hath happened in sight of many, as abundant testimony showeth. In one kind of death the spirit also dieth, and this hath been known while the body was in vigor for many years. However, as is veritably attested, it dieth with the body, but after a season is raised up again in that place where the body did decay. And now the actual story. Pondering these words of Hali, whom God rest, and questioning their full meaning, as one who, having an intimation, yet doubts if there not be something behind, other than that which he has discerned, I noted not whether I had strayed, until a sudden chill wind striking my face revived in me a sense of my surroundings. I observed with astonishment that everything seemed unfamiliar. On every side of me stretched a bleak and desolate expanse of plain, covered with a tall overgrowth of sere grass, which rustled and whistled in the autumn wind with heaven knows what mysterious and disquieting suggestion. Protruded at long intervals above it stood strangely shaped and somber-colored rocks which seemed to have an understanding with one another, and to exchange looks of uncomfortable significance, as if they had reared their heads to watch the issue of some foreseen event. A few blasted trees here and there appeared as leaders in this malevolent conspiracy of silent expectation. The day, I thought, must be far advanced, although the sun was invisible, and though sensible that the air was raw and chill, my consciousness of that fact was rather mental than physical. I had no feeling of discomfort. Over all the dismal landscape, a canopy of low, lead-colored clouds hung like a visible curse. In all this there was a menace and a portent, a hint of evil, an intimation of doom. Bird, beast, or insect, there was none. The land sighed in the bare branches of the dead trees, and the gray grass bent to whisper its dread secret to the earth. But no other sound nor motion broke the awful repose of that dismal place. I observed in the herbage a number of weather-worn stones, evidently shaped with tools. They were broken, covered with moss, and half sunken in the earth. Some lay prostrate, some leaned at various angles, none was vertical. They were obviously headstones of graves, though the graves themselves had no longer existed as either mounds or depressions. The years had no longer existed. The years had leveled them all. Scattered here and there more massive blocks showed where some pompous tomb or ambitious monument had once flung its feeble defiance at oblivion. So old seemed these relics, these vestiges of vanity and memorials of affection and piety, so battered and worn and stained, so neglected, deserted, and forgotten the place, that I could not help thinking myself the discoverer of the burial ground of a prehistoric race of men whose very name was long extinct. Filled with these reflections, I was for some time heedless of the sequence of my own experiences. But soon I thought, how came I hither? A moment's reflection seemed to make this all clear, and explain at the same time, though in a disquieting way, the singular character with which my fancy had invested all that I saw or heard. I was ill. I remembered now that I had been prostrated by a sudden fever, and that my family had told me that in my periods of delirium I had constantly cried out for liberty and air, and that had been forced to be held in bed to prevent my escape out of doors. Now I had eluded the vigilance of my attendants, and had wandered hither, but to where? I could not conjecture. Clearly I was a considerable distance from the city where I dwelt, the ancient and famous city of Carcosa. No signs of human life were anywhere visible nor audible. No rising smoke, no watchdog's bark, no lowing of cattle, no shouts of children at play. Nothing but that dismal burial place and its air of mystery and dread, due to my own disordered brain. Was I not again delirious, that there becoming a beyond human aid? Was it not all just an illusion of my madness? I called out the names of my wives and my sons, reached out my hands in search of theirs, even as I walked among the crumbling stones and in the withered grass. A noise behind me caused me to turn about. A wild animal, a lynx, was approaching. A thought came to me. If I break down here in the desert, if the fever return, and if I fail, this beast will be at my throat. I sprang toward it, shouting. It trotted tranquilly by within a hand's breadth of me and disappeared behind a rock. A moment later, a man's head appeared to rise out of the ground a short distance away. He was actually ascending the farther slope of a low hill whose crest was hardly to be distinguished from the general level. His whole figure soon came into view against the background of gray cloud. He was half naked, half clad in skins. His hair was unkempt, his beard long and ragged. In one hand he carried a bow and arrow, in the other a blazing torch with a long trail of black smoke. He walked slowly and with caution, as if he feared falling into some open grave concealed by the tall grass. This strange apparition surprised but did not alarm. Taking such a course as to intercept him, I met him almost face to face, accosting him with the familiar salutation, "God keep you." He gave no heed, nor did he arrest his pace. "Good stranger," I continued, "I am ill and lost. Direct me, I beseech you, to Carcosa." The man broke into a barbarous chant in an unknown tongue, passing on and away. An owl on the branch of a decaying tree hooted dismally, and was answered by another in the distance. Looking upward, I saw through a sudden rift in the clouds Aldebaran and the Hyades, and in all this there was a hint of the night, the lynx, the man, the torch, the owl. Yet I saw even the stars in the absence of darkness. I saw, but was not apparently seen nor heard. Under what awful spell did I exist? I seated myself at the root of a great tree, seriously to consider what it were best to do. That I was mad I could no longer doubt. Yet I recognized a ground of doubt in that conviction. Of fever I had no trace. I had withal a sense of exhilaration and vigor altogether unknown to me, a sense of mental and physical exhaustion. My senses seemed all alert. I could feel the air as a ponderous substance. I could hear the silence. A great root of the tree against whose trunk I leaned as I held enclosed in its grasp a slab of stone, a part of which protruded into a recess formed by another root. The stone was thus partly protected from the weather, although greatly decomposed. Its edges were worn round, its corners eaten away, its surface deeply furrowed and scaled. Glittering particles of mica were visible in the earth about it, vestiges of its decomposition. This stone had apparently marked the grave out of which a tree had sprung long years ago. The tree's exacting roots had robbed the grave and made the stone a prisoner. The sudden wind pushed some dry leaves and twigs from the uppermost face of the stone, and I saw the low relief letters of an inscription, and I bent to read it. God in heaven, my name and fall, the date of my birth, the date of my death. A level shaft of light illuminated the whole side of the tree as I sprang to my feet in terror. The sun was rising in the rosy east. I stood between the tree and its broad red disk. No shadow darkened the trunk. A chorus of howling wolves saluted the dawn. I saw them sitting on their haunches, singly and in groups on the summits of irregular mounds and tumulus, filling a half of my desert prospect and extending on the horizon. And then I knew that these were the ruins of the ancient and famous city of Carcosa. That is an inhabitant of Carcosa. Now, again, and I apologize for my reading, and sometimes when I read it, I have to stumble on a couple of words here and there. But there are these lines in here that Ambrose Bierce has, like, for example, when he's describing the graves, where he talks about this, and so this idea of the vestiges of vanity and memorials of affection, so that laid now neglected, deserted, and such, or the silent watchers of the trees that watch silently over the scene. He has these great, evocative lines that just sell you on the story, the location, and more. And again, that's a flash page of fiction. It didn't take me more than, 7 or 8 minutes for me to read it, 4 pages long. And this is Ambrose Bierce at his best. So I wanted to give you a chance to kind of see him in a flash fictions kind of a setting, and then if take a look at the rest of them. He's got, like I said, more than 200, I think it's almost 250 short stories that he wrote. That's a ton of short stories that you can read and check out, many of which are not going to be 3 or 4 pages long. They're going to have some heft to them and stuff. But Ambrose Bierce is this great writer. He just does a lot of fun things with the word. So that's Inhabitant of our Carcosa. It's very influential. A lot of things came along later on that loved it, that embraced it, that took it in, as well as some of his other horror stories too. And he is kind of really considered a master, not only while the time he was writing, one of the great like sort of American authors while he was writing, but also he's still considered this great writer today, and his stuff has really sort of stood the test of time. And in fact, we're going to take a look at one of the writers in just a moment. And this is the middle of kind of a three-part of these older sort of horror classics that I wanted to take a look at, and this is going to be the third. This is the middle of those, and so I'll take you to the next one, which is by Robert Chambers here in a little bit. But I wanted to give you a chance to get a feel for that, again, from the 1880s. What did you think of it? Have you read Ambrose Bierce before? Had you read this story before? What did you think of An Inhabitant of Carcosa? I'm also going to link you to it down in the comments below in case you want to read it yourself. Again, it's very quick, and you can kind of see some of the... Sometimes I stumble over some words, but you can kind of get a chance to kind of really feel it as a reader and such, rather than a listener. But it's great stuff, and again, it's heavily inspired the world of Carcosa, the character of Holly. These are very important kind of things that are definitely things that resonate through the story and as well through later on. So what did you think? Have you read it before or not? Did you like it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, there's going to be a lot more to come. You might as well hit that subscribe button because, you know, there's going to be lots of reviews. We're also going to have some analyses articles here and there too. Also, hey, if you watch this video, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing in this video. We all have busy lives. You know, we're all doing lots of stuff. So the fact that you spent 15 minutes here watching it with me, listening to this story, I really do appreciate it. So thank you once again for your time.